This episode of the Troxel Podcast is made possible with support from ArchIT. Are you tired of standard IT services that miss the mark? Choose ArchIT for specialized, proactive IT management, BIM support, and robust data security tailored for architects. Whether you're a team of 10 or a growing firm of 50 plus, ArchIT understands the architecture industry and will empower your unique creative vision to enable you to do your best work. Embrace a technology team that enhances, not hinders, your design process. Visit getarchit.com for your free IT assessment and start transforming your firm and your tech experience today. That's getarchit.com. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel, and in this episode, I welcome Nirva Fereshetian. Nirva is a principal and chief information officer at CBT Architects, which is a Boston-based award-winning design firm providing services nationally and internationally in architecture, interior design, and urban design. Nirva holds an undergraduate degree in architecture and a master's degree in architecture and computation from UCLA. At CBT, she leads multiple teams within the digital practice group, including design technology, business technology, and computational design. And in her day-to-day role as CBT's CIO, she was also named one of the top women in tech in Boston this year. In this episode, Nirva and I explore the complexities of implementing and managing digital practice within an architecture firm, including the challenges posed by tool fatigue, the importance of understanding business problems, and the intricacies of vetting and adopting new technologies. Our discussion covers the evolving role of technology in architectural practice, the benefits of collaboration between firms within the AEC industry, and the importance of building a continuous learning culture. Nirva also shares her insights on integrating technology seamlessly into architectural practice and fostering innovation through effective communication and relationship building. As always, my ask of you is to help the show by subscribing to Troxel on YouTube and in your favorite podcast app to let me know that you're a fan. If you're watching this video on YouTube right now, please click that like button. And if you'd like to get an email when episodes are published with all the links and other information from the episode, you can sign up at trxl.co. You can also directly support the show by becoming a member at that site as well. Again, that's trxl.co. So, thank you for listening. And now, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Nirva Fereshetian. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you and see you again. It hasn't been that long, but it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Well, thank you for having me, Evan. I have certainly been the beneficiary of listening to so many great conversations you've had with other guests. So I'm hoping that this conversation will be a good one for others.
I'm sure it will be. I want to focus on the practice side and definitely give voice to that part of AEC tech, right? Because the practice side has to implement. We have to train people. We have to vet the software and the tech, and we have to roll it out. And I know that you know how difficult that is, but I want to give voice to that and what digital practice leaders are dealing with out there in the real world, not just kind of the fantasy world where everything works perfectly, because turns out it doesn't really go it's not smooth sailing like everybody hopes it could be, right?
Right.
So give us an idea of what your role is at CBT. I mean, let's assume that I've already read your bio because people listening to this will have already heard it, but introduce what you're actually doing, because there's a title, but then there's what you actually do at a firm, and give us an idea of the size of CBT and where your practice is located.
Right. Sure. So the title is Chief Information Officer, but as you said, title is one thing, but what we actually do in different firms, depending on size of firms or the practice culture, it's a little different. For me, due to our size, it's everything digital. But my main interest is I have an undergraduate degree and a graduate degree in architecture. So my main difference is the intersection of technology and architecture. But firms our size, I also have to take care of everything else. That is the framework. So a lot of learning, and that has happened on that end. So we have a business technology group, a design technology group, computational technology group, and a couple of years before, I've added a knowledge manager and a training um, team member who is attached to our digital practice and not to HR. So it has been really a journey, sort of, and my responsibilities have grown as the culture and the tech and the implementation of things have changed recently, and more, in the last 10 years, but more recently, right after COVID. I think the opportunity to connect with the business, the opportunity to solve the business problems is what me and the rest of the group are really interested in.
And so maybe you could paint a picture of what that evolution has looked like, and maybe not every step along the way,
Right.
but what do you traditionally see as this kind of a role in a firm, and what you used to do versus what you're doing now? Kind of paint a picture of what that looks like.
I think the phenomenal difference has been that a lot of a lot of people have started similar to me, where they have an architecture background and somehow got involved to technology.
Mm-hmm.
And but the major difference I see from now than it was before is that technology has gained um, to be not really in the forefront still, but to be on the table of the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Before used to be, can you make something work? Or are we using the right version? Or can we get on Revit? We're on AutoCAD. But I think now the difference is, do we understand what the business does? Can we solve their problems? Can we enhance the strategy? And so it's a very different role, especially firms our size. I think if you are in the much larger end, you still have a lot of segregation of, infrastructure, technology, and other things versus digital practice. For our size, it's really all interdependent. And I think the main purpose of our existence is to show that it's not about the software, it's about the people, and it's about
Mm-hmm.
how we implement and how we PR it inside our firms. I mean, certainly none of these skills were things that I learned, neither at school nor at graduate school, or so seems a lot of the skill sets that are necessary to implement things is less technical, more, I'm not going to call it soft skills, but a lot of
Yeah.
understanding
Right.
and a business acumen, relationship acumen, PR, everything that
Yeah.
comes in that scope. It's one thing to be good at the technology, but it's another thing to have those skill sets. And not just for me, but even the team members. They have to have that convincing aptitude and the psychology behind the scenes to make something happen.
I feel like that's kind of a role of something, at least an outcome that I would like to see come out of episodes like this, is giving people the tools to be able to have those conversations, because by hearing us talk about these things, it kind of sets the table for how we talk about technology and the practice of architecture and the merging of those things, to give people, I don't want to necessarily say the arguments. It's not like you're trying to win an argument, but at least present these things in a way that, to your point, drives business forward, solves business problems. And that is a great approach to getting technology implemented in firms, is not just here's the latest thing that we should be using, but here's why we should be using it, or why we should be testing it and trying to find out if this is the right tool to use. Because the end goal is, why do we practice architecture at all? Why do we do things the way that we do them? It's not the tools that we actually use, right? You want to define the goals and then backfill that with potential ways to accomplish those goals. That could be any number of technology, it could be any number of people, teams, training, coaches, all kinds of things to get to that end goal. But you have to kind of state what that end goal is and then reverse engineer it. And to your point, like, why do we do what we do? That is the real driver. And how do we do business? And then how are we going to achieve those are much more secondary to all that.
To understand the goal is certainly the first requirement. And a lot of team members, I always recommend them to go and sit through different presentations, different lunch sessions, even though it's not involving technology, because that's how you understand the business and you could see their side of the story. To just set up standards and say you need to follow them or set up things, it just doesn't work. So the goal is the very primary, but I think achieving that goal is the key element is how to talk about it, how to present it, how to not just internally, but even working with the technology companies, even working with the startups. It's how you present and how you receive that makes a success. Sometimes they don't understand what the workflow is, although some of them claim to have had past architectural experience or not claim, but they really have had it and then moved on to work at a startup. And some do not really understand why are things not working. And essentially, a lot of it is about how you present it and how you talk about it. Technology is factual, does it work or does it not work? But a lot of others, that part you can fix. What you cannot fix is if you've accidentally messed up the implementation, so sometimes you can never have those people back to use the same tool. So some things that work in other offices don't work in our office and vice versa. I think to understand the culture, to understand, sort of to be in their shoes is how you can implement. You can't just say, well, this is our standard and why are you not following it? Or this is the tool we use and therefore we're not going to give you the other tool. So it doesn't work that way.
I totally agree with that. I'm curious how you learned how to do that. If it was just kind of how you're wired already as a person, or if these are techniques that you developed along your journey to get to where you are now. Because when I was leading digital practice at my firm, I felt like my success in that role was very much dependent on my career as an architect getting to that point. Working with client groups, learning how to, as a designer, I had to synthesize ideas from 30 to 50 people on a project into a real project, right? And actually implement their ideas in design. And that happens through building consensus, communicating clearly, taking people through a step-by-step process to get from A to Z, not just starting at the end, right? And so I developed those skills over 2 decades to learn how to do that effectively. And then when I stepped into digital practice, I could actually do that inside the firm. I didn't have to go outside the firm anymore, right, to do that. But there's various stakeholders of all different levels inside the firm that you need to build consensus, get everybody on the same page, talk about a strategy that encompasses all of those aspects of training and PR and communication and implementation and support and all of those things. I'm curious how that worked for you to get to where you are.
So I certainly wasn't wired like that. So I think it's the status is always learning and in process, so I don't think there is a place you can achieve that you could say, oh, well, I'm perfect at this. I can do any implementation or I can communicate. It's personal relationship building inside the firm first. I have tried to rely on storytelling the way our designers, I've aspired to do the storytelling that our designers do on a daily basis when they present to their clients. It is about that. And it's hard to explain to younger staff who are very savvy in tools and very savvy in coding and computational design and very frustrated when they cannot find that communication with the parties that they're trying to work with. And I always think that it's all about human relationships, how we can understand each other, and it's less about technology and it's more about trying to relay my position to them and their position to us. So how can we bridge the gap where, typical problems are like we don't want everyone to do whatever they want, but at the same time, we want to have the leeway for people to experiment. So it's a very fine balance, and I think every day is a new day to figure out how to do it better. With who? Depends on who is on the other side. Personalities are different. People's experiences are different. There's always, well, we did this in another office or something, so there's always that challenge that comes by. And yes, it might be different with clients, with different team members, and we just have to learn to adjust. But we also have to relay properly, why are we as technologists saying that these things are important? So it's a very collaborative, yet very fractured process to me. Like the designers at the front end produce things and without really, I'm not going to use the word caring, without really thinking through of how downstream that might or might not affect other people's work. And then the ball is passed forward and other team members take the model, and then it's passed forward and other team members take the CA process and it passed forward to the owner. So my take has been like, how can we make sure that all of us care about the same thing? Because everything is connected, and it's not just, do my task and throw it over the fence and send it to somebody else. And the success of the firm, I think, is about understanding that and then carrying that success on a project level outside of our firm. It's highly collaborative, but very much not caring about the transitional aspects. And once those pieces come together, you have a successful project. It shouldn't be that hard to convince at each stage that there is something to think about when you move the baton.
You have not once said, and I congratulate you, you never said the word handoff. And this gets back to that communication thing, right? It's like, what words do you use? And you're using like words that are building. You're using moving the ball forward, progressing.
Yes.
You're talking about this in a handing the baton, like it's a progression to the next who's going to take this and build upon it, right? Instead of the idea of handing off has always been kind of a dirty word in practice, right? It's like the designers hand it off to production. Then the production people just grumble, hate the designers for all these things that no, it's how can we smoothly transition and get the most without having to redo work, without having to guess at what somebody was trying to do, without, screwing it up. They did it wrong, and now we have to garbage in, garbage out. Like there's definitely a completely different approach, and that to me I think is one of the really cool things that digital practice enables. And to your point earlier, where earlier in practice technology was very much kind of an add-on menu item. It was like, well, do you want renderings? And then you're going to pay for those, and you're going to get them at these milestones. And it really was, because it was so hard and it was so time consuming, it really was an add-on. But now it's not. Like renderings are free, right? It's just part of the design process. And that has really evolved. And that's just one example of this kind of integration. And not only integration, but it's like technology is the backbone, right? It no longer is an add-on. It is the way that we deliver projects. And getting everybody on board with that process and how it can be utilized in a very efficient and positive way to enable success at every step along the path of project delivery is really where digital practice is. And early on, when you were just talking about digital practice at CBT, you mentioned 4 or 5 groups. Can you mention what those are again to kind of give everybody a holistic picture of what digital practice is? Because I'm sure it didn't start off like that.
No,
it probably started off as IT.
Yes.
Like that's
yes.
Right. But now it's evolved into something quite different.
So it started as IT, and I was the component of computer-aided design, or taking care of the specific tools for this vertical. But I have tried very hard the last more than 10 years to remove that word. And not talk about IT, but talk about digital practice being encompassing all of that. So there's the business technology, which is just basic need for things to work, whether that is internet access, your devices, your communication, and design technologists who are individuals with architectural background, passionate with technology, try to stay 5 or 10 steps ahead of everybody and do the research. And then computational design is something we have tried to plan and do for the last 4 or 5 years, and now it has taken off in terms of the necessity as being part of the design technology colleagues. And then the last one was something we added right before COVID, and because I thought that just parading these technologies without proper training, with proper monitoring of those trainings. So that's a knowledge manager that we have that manages our learning programs or our individual setup programs and lunch and learns. Or, I think a lot of it comes from seeing. So for the ticketing system is a database of everything, Evan. I feel like if you look at it, you can figure out what is the pulse of the company. Where are we lacking? Why are they asking so many questions? Something's broken. We haven't set it up correctly, or we haven't taught them or trained them. So a lot of the training ideas come from that. So if it's repeatedly asking the same thing, or repeatedly we're having issues in setting up a model or whatever, that means that I always say it's not them, it's us. And I want to make sure that there is no them and us. I shouldn't even have used that word. I've tried to make it feel like we are embedded in their teams, that we are the partnership, and not, hey, call them and something's wrong. And so that is the entire effort. Are we successful 100% of the time? No, like I said, it's always a new day and a new way of working, but we want to be considered as part of their embedded teams, be part of them, be part of the business. And even on the business technology side, which is a little bit further out than all the others architecturally, I always tell them that if you don't understand what we're doing, you can't fix our devices, because you have to understand what the outcome of the business is and what they're trying to do to give any kind of support.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so when you said ticketing system, obviously you're talking about help tickets,
desk,
right? People submitting help desk tickets.
But all these 3-4 groups look at that ticketing system, So so it's one common system. If whether there's a computational design issue or a design technology issue or a knowledge issue or some training issue, everybody looks at it. And it's kind of, to me, is the psychology of the firm. You could really detect there what is the pulse of the firm, what is our support structure, how many people are having problems. And so it's a lot of help for decision making, just in general. Are people even are people in the right groups, in the right teams with their skill sets? Sometimes, as scheduling happens on the fly in all of our offices. Right. Well, let's grab this person and that person because they're available. So we can detect that immediately, that the person might not be in the right role, or might need something to be in help of or training of some kind to be in the right role. So I feel like we're trying to connect the right technology with the right people constantly, whether it's inside or outside.
Yeah. That's interesting. How large is CBT? How many people?
We're between 200 and 250. Depends when you ask us.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious because I think, there's smaller firms that don't have help desks implemented, right? And so at some point it becomes like, this is how we manage the flow of information in these ways, like for support or for information, right, that you're talking about. So smaller firms probably struggle with that a little bit more, and they don't have the data to look at. But I think this kind of makes an argument for a system like this, because if you want insight into the pulse of, And it has to be a thing where people get results out of, or else they're not going to use it, right? So if you have a help desk and you're just collecting information and you're never acting on it, like that doesn't work either, right? So people just won't use it, and then you still won't have insight into the pulse of what's actually going on the floor of your office. So these all go together. And I think what's so interesting about kind of how the structure that you just laid out as far as digital practice goes, and how it operates as one unit, but you have several different special roles within that, or groups, that it really is a holistic, strategic endeavor. And you have to think about it that way, or else it's just not going to be effective in your organization.
Right. And I see it like a practice unit, interior design is a practice unit, and urban design is a practice unit. And it's a practice unit that kind of is the center of all of the practice units to try to help, as it's not only just one size doesn't fit all outside of our firms, but one size doesn't fit all even inside of our firms, depending on scale of a project, or the typology of a project, and the people that are involved in the project.
This episode is made possible with support from AVAIL. AVAIL makes the best software to manage all of your AEC digital content. Dedicated to developing tools that save AEC teams time, AVAIL has now added Revit application version management to its suite of content management capabilities. Once a painful manual process, Revit application versioning is now automatic for AVAIL customers. Publishers simply upload files to an AVAIL channel, and the files are automatically converted to newer versions from Revit 2021 through Revit 2025. For users, the experience is then seamless. They can search, select, and utilize the Revit content in AVAIL, regardless of what Revit version they are working in. Inquire about a demo of AVAIL and its new Revit application version management features today at getavail.com/request-demo. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. When I used to present the structure of digital practice and how it would become a thing at the firm that I was at, first I thought about it as like, we have these different practice groups, and digital practice was a layer that kind of ran on top of all of those. But later on, I switched the diagram to be more like what you just said, where it's a hub in the middle. And all of these pieces come off of, but also feed back into that hub, because it really is, like I said earlier, like the backbone of how we deliver projects. We're not going to deliver projects any other way. We're not going to deliver vellum. We're not going to, right? We're not going to do blueprints. We don't have the ammonia machines. We're not doing it like that anymore. So we actually have to reconfigure the way that we think about this so that everybody can use it to its fullest potential. Because if you can't get out of your old way of thinking about the way that technology was implemented as a separate layer, if you can't think about it the new way, it's not going to actually reach its potential in the organization.
Right. And I think it's the hub and the success of the hub is how far the extensions are, and that relationship to the surrounding, I don't know whatever you call it, either typologies or studios or whatever you have in terms of structure of an office, or practice units, other practice units. So if you have, and I've tried to establish that on different levels of communication. So I have a group of people that I've picked from those practice units, as I call them, like technology allies, so to kind of run some of our ideas with them first, to say, hey, is this right? And then also get information from them as the inner workings of their practices and what their experience has been. Why are people complaining? What is it that truly not working? Not the technology, So those are like not the fix and break things, but what is the process? And in some instances, the solution might not have anything to do with technology, but it might have something to do with the way the process is set up, or the way client demands are different from other projects. So there is so many factors. And essentially, I think that we have changed processes. Yes, we don't use vellum and we don't use other things, but in some instances, we haven't changed the way we think.
Right.
So we There is this, I think I can give the analogy of if your native language is not English, you kind of end up thinking or counting or whatever in your head with your native language, although you are saying in English, right? So I feel that that's the analogy. A lot of people are so much rooted in the old way of doing things, even though the technology is changed and it's a PDF now, but and not a piece of paper, but their thinking hasn't changed.
Right.
And that's fundamentally an obstruction in moving forward. And that goes outside of our firm into, not change contractual agreements. Now, I feel in some ways the technology is a little bit ahead of the game always, and kind of retracts a little to support these types of thought processes that are not changing. So it's funny because last week someone told me on a project, like, oh, what do you mean the RFIs will be less? Well, then that party that is benefiting from making money out of the RFIs is not happy. So, Evan, how can you solve that problem when technology is out there? Technology is out there to solve that, but we don't want to solve it because certain people were out of business for that, right? So the same goes to internally when we show all these tools about clash detections or other ways of figuring out things and solving problems before it gets to site. Then they ask us, well, are we contractually supposed to deliver these things? Why are we doing these things? Well, wait a minute.
They're constantly at odds.
Which is why I said that it says it's a collaborative firm, a collaborative ecosystem, but it's not actually a collaborative ecosystem because we're still thinking the old ways. We're delivering in new technologies. And I can't wait to see what that AI thing is going to do in terms of that type of process, right? So the tools have changed, but it's hard to change mindsets.
Yeah. For the longest time, I said behavior, and I found out that people don't like their behavior to change. They don't like that idea, right? So mindset's a better word to use there because it's not so offensive to people. But your point is absolutely correct. There's this picture that gets painted of an ideal future scenario, and the only thing we can actually disrupt is ourselves and our processes because there are so many hard constraints just outside of the organization, whether it's who's doing plan check or how they're accepting submittals or what's in the contract, who wrote that contract, how has that ever been updated? Like there's so many things that we're kind of butting up against all the time. Like Clifton Harness from TestFit said, if you want to change the industry, you change the owner architect contract.
That's
that the agreement is where you need to start there, not in the digital twin that you deliver, right? Because like that to me is like you're aiming at the wrong thing. You have to start at the fundamentals that are actually going to have the ability to ripple throughout the ecosystem to actually create change if you want to see change happen. But so many times we're focused on the shiny thing that looks like it's going to do something when in fact it's never going to make it because we can't get past the other barriers that are really hard to disrupt because that's where they're making their money, right? There's no incentive there to get rid of that for them. And so why would they? And we fight up against that all the time. And I think it's important for technology companies to understand that ecosystem approach that we have to operate within as architects and engineers because we don't have control over the changes that are happening over there. We have to work within the system that exists. It is evolving slowly, but it's very slow. Let's be honest about that.
Yeah, and I think, I always, there's all these things about innovate and what firms are innovating. And I've spoken in places where the titles of the conferences are innovate. And it's hard to see that a lot of things a lot of us are doing can be labeled as innovate. I think innovate means to me that a fundamental change of the practice overall. The entire ecosystem. We can only innovate when we get there using different tools and kind of solving internal problems or evolving to better practices. Yes, it gets better. we get better at it. It gets
That's
less.
evolution, not
It's not.
innovation.
Yes, it's absolutely evolution. And I know the reputation is that change doesn't come easily it doesn't come easily to any humans, but specifically to this industry, largely because we are chained to all these mindsets, and not until those are collectively worked on and changed, I don't see innovation. I see gradual evolving of things to get a little bit better than yesterday, but I can't see innovate. There's some examples of, there's always that Uber innovating, the whole process of the taxi situation. I think that's a complete change of how we do things that can be called, beginning of innovation. But swapping some tools for others or creating some automations which are necessary to avoid waste of time or redundancies or things like that are good things, definitely, but not necessarily innovating.
There's confusion around those words because the confusion even comes from within our firms themselves, right? Our marketing departments in our firms want to pat ourselves on the back in front of our clients and say, look, we're innovating. Right. And so there's confusion because a lot of times it's like, well, we're doing AI in our firms and here's maybe some different ways that we're doing AI, right? So that at least we look like we're current, or maybe we're on the leading edge of something, and that's why you might choose us over a competitor. But the fact is, like, a lot of times that's like innovation theater being put out there, and it's not actually taking a foothold in the offices themselves. And it becomes this game that we play with words to position ourselves, to get the right perspective, like to I shouldn't say get the right perspective, but to tailor the perspective that others have about us, right? And so then we start using those words inside the firms, and then there's confusion, like what's actually happening here. Is it really innovation or is it just evolution? And words do matter, but at the same time, getting back to kind of people's interests, like where the incentives are, the incentive is to show that we're leaders. And how are we doing that? We're doing it through innovation. But how are we really doing that? By automating parking layout. Like, not really, right? So that we are at odds with these words.
Right. But I think I've learned, like I said, there is a lot of things that I learned along the process of skills that, that skills that I should be interested in improving. Not that I am there, but perception is everything, Evan. So even in technology, perception is everything. Even though technology to me is just black and white, does it work or does it not work? So I can never be a salesperson, because when those people start, they can embellish everything.
Too honest.
Yeah. So
right.
But still, perception is everything. Like, I'm going to come back to what I said in terms of how you present it, how you say it, how you talk about it. And I think, we work with dozens of startups. It's something that I am very, very passionate about, that it is anybody in this ecosystem needs to contribute to all those people that are trying hard to innovate, do something very different, or go up against incumbents that never was not a reality in the last decade. So I think by contributing whatever, I think we're a beneficiary of others who've contributed and worked with the startups. And so we need to put in some things to our share of it. So I feel very passionate about that. And we have worked with lots of them. But I feel like them and us, it's all about perception. And sometimes they're not good at showing, they're not good at presenting. They're not good at, although their product is good. And sometimes they're so good at presenting, but their product is not good.
The value's not there.
So, and the same goes for us internally. It's how good are we to communicate with all those other practice units and collaborate. I think it's all about how we're perceived. And once once the perception is broken, Evan, it's like trust. It's hard to get it back.
Yeah, yeah. I was speaking with a building product manufacturer just yesterday, actually, and innovation is happening. Evolution, I'll say, is happening in their
Yep.
category of product, but maybe an old version of that product didn't fly with architects, right? And therefore the category has been written off. And it's
Right.
very hard to reestablish yourself as, well, we fixed all those problems and now you can count on us.
Right.
That's a
Right.
super hard barrier to overcome. And so you're talking about that from like technology standpoint, right? It's the same. This is a human condition. Like it happens in all categories. It's like, oh, I don't trust that brand of vacuum because it
You had
broke on
one
me after a week.
experience. Yep.
It doesn't. Yeah, it's all based on experience, and it is very hard to reestablish maybe a new version
Right.
of that in the market once you've already created a bad situation. I want to talk about these startups that you're working with, not necessarily by name, but just in implementation, because something that you've talked about is tool fatigue.
Yes.
I've categorized it as digital fatigue or app fatigue. It's like more and more of our time is consumed sitting in front of a screen, whether it's a desktop or a tablet or a phone, right? It's just more and more screens, and we're being inundated with the tool explosion that's going on in AEC, but everywhere else as well, right? So these do bleed into each other for sure. And you talked about the different groups that operate under digital practice, and I'm interested from an implementation standpoint because we're getting the fire hose of new tools, especially right now. It feels like more than ever now with AI, and everything's AI, and there's all these different really specific AI tools. Not to really go down the AI
Right.
lane here, but just tools in general in AEC. I'm interested in vetting and implementation and support and training, and just for you to kind of tell a story about how you go about trying to accomplish that. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because these tech companies come to you like they are the only thing that you need to pay attention to right now, because that's their world, right? It makes sense. But at the same time, they don't really look around and have the bigger picture perception that you have to have as a digital practice leader, CIO of CBT architects, to say, we have to look at everything and how everything works together and how we would roll this out to 200 plus people across this many offices. And then we have to support it and we have to train. Like all of that responsibility falls on you. All they have to do is sell you the subscription, right? And get you to buy into that subscription. But talk about the real world challenges with all of those things once it actually gets through the wall, and maybe even step before that. How do you even go about vetting or trying out or getting excited about these tools that are on offer?
Yeah, I think the I don't know, there are lists at EC Hub everywhere, over 1,000 tools to look at, and
Only
each
a
one,
thousand
yeah, I
plus.
don't know,
Yeah.
over 1,000 or whatever, but also the entire other ecosystem of non-AEC tools that there is also 1,000 of them to look at. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it very much for me, I'm one of the other skill sets is I now investigate how they're backed up and what's their VC funding, things that I never looked at before, Evan. Like
Because of longevity
that's right.
concerns and
Oh,
things like that.
because
Yeah.
things that I always say that we're putting bets on the table.
Right.
And sometimes the company is disappearing. Like we never tested one, but like I think the company's name Co-Design or something. Like after 4 or 5 years, they just disappeared.
Closed doors.
Right, they
Yeah,
closed for
shop.
good, and that doesn't only happen with startups. It happens with established companies. Like Autodesk decided that they're not going to support Format anymore, although
Right.
they really hard pushed it for a few years before that. So it's there is certainly risks, but I think part of it is that I kind of categorize tools. It's very important to look at them as to what process they belong to. So for the front end, and which is why everybody, when you ask, does an office use AI? And mostly they talk about the image generation part of AI, because I think not only that is the most, design seems to be the king of our, it's always the flashiest role in our offices, So, but beyond that, it's more of a one-to-one relationship with the tool. So if it's an individual workflow, it's relatively easy to say, well, we can test all of these things, and it's just personal preference to say yes or no. So the examples are that if they want to use Veras because they used it a couple of times and they think it's good, or even on a basic level, we have designers who want Enscape, others want Twinmotion, others want something else. But those are relatively easy to say, well, we can test it, and even if we don't, if there's personal preferences, we can kind of consent to that, right? So this designer uses that and not that. But when it moves beyond that, it becomes extremely critical to try to make good decisions and kind of pass it through. It says a couple of things. Is this solving a problem? Is this better than is it replacing another tool we have? Is it adding to another tool we have? Definitely, is it providing some service that we can do now that we weren't able to do before because we didn't have the tool? It has to kind of comply to one of these things. Is it faster than what we have? So I divide it to parts. It's some things that the design technology team looks at some products as a replacement to an existing product that is not working, or people in the teams have heard it or tried something and they think that it solves a problem they have. So our initial step is to actually create a small testing group, whether it's inside our teams or the design technology, and kind of validate that before we move on. And in many instances, it's real hard conversations with the startups to explain to them if that fits or does not fit in our workflow. So even established products is hard to implement if it doesn't fit. So sometimes there's so many overlaps. The product builds a 3D model, but our designers don't want to use anything but Rhino. So how does that work out? Because then they ask for the plugin to Rhino to that product and not build it there. So if you don't understand the workflow, or if you're trying to build something where there is a industry accepted product, if you're replacing that, you need to at least be as good as that. Don't come before that, Don't come before that because we're not replacing it. So there is so many things to look at as barriers to move. And then there is things that are really expert products, like I give the example of upcodes, and it just services a small group of people. Our code experts use it. But then we proliferated that to say, okay, it's also kind of a training and education for people who are up and coming and trying to learn that. But that's sliver of it's not really everybody. So the last thing is, the most challenging thing is to implement platform products, which are supposed to be used by everyone. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Right. So, and those decisions are really hard to revert. So if we made a mistake and we don't want to use that, or we want to transition to another product like that, it takes a long time because all that data sets are there. We have to move them to the new place. We have to train everybody. So having the training person attached to our department certainly helps. But really looking at all of the implementations in their own context is what we try to do. We try to make sure that we're not inundating people. So for example, a lot of things are now possible and available in Construction Cloud, including marking up drawings or whatever. So the question is, do we really need these other extra tools? But they're used to it, Evan. So like it takes a whole training session to say, well, you could stay in this one product and do some of the things that you're doing with parts and pieces of other tools.
Yeah, I think the what you're saying about implementing at the platform level is very difficult because of the reasons plus cost, right? It's also a very expensive endeavor, plus training and all of the things that you have to do to bring people up to speed and keep them up to speed as it evolves. But then those platforms naturally leave holes. Like they can't do everything perfectly well. So we see startups coming in with really specific things that they do. And now we're feeling like, okay, well, I need to use this for the feasibility study. Then I need to use this for the programming. Then I need to use this for the conceptual design. Then I need to use this for the design development and construction documents. And I need all these other plugins to do all the little holes that those platforms leave. And all of a sudden, we've got to know a lot about a lot of apps out there. And then you have to manage that. Your group manages all of the help desk tickets that come in for all those different apps. And it's worth saying all this because this is what firms are dealing with every single day. And then there's the cloud, and then there's where are the files, and then there's the governance and the ethics around the AI stuff. And there's all these other pieces to that puzzle, and it is incredibly complex to manage all that and have happy users and get great outcomes and all of those things. And that's what you're in charge of at your firm, right?
Right. I think that we have to learn celebrate small victories in order to get to kind of have the bigger victories. So sometimes these tools plug holes, but you have to really think about was it really worth the time and effort to learn something totally new because it plugged a temporary hole. Some of them are plugging real holes and really worthwhile to give it an effort. And the other thing is like the way some of the startups are progressing is incredible. Something that did not work a couple of weeks ago, they can make it work in 2 weeks. So you can't just leave them and say, well, it didn't work. So in some of our instances, it's so refreshing to talk to owners and directly or developers directly on the issue and immediately get response and fix it. And those are really great experiences we're having in terms of using products that, develop that fast or change that fast.
And versus the ones that don't.
That's right. That's versus the ones that, people have been complacent about, right? So it's not going to work. That's it. We're set where we have 10 different workarounds and that's how we're going to live because we know that nobody's going to do anything about
it.
Yep.
Yeah. This episode is made possible with support from AVAIL. Along with their newly released Revit application version management, AEC software company AVAIL has added another powerful new workflow feature called palettes to its suite of content management capabilities. Palettes are user-customized lists of content in AVAIL and can function as a favorites list, as starter content for a specific project, or to drive workflows such as redlining construction details. Customers administrators can add palettes to their accounts through the AVAIL Manage portal page today. Interested in seeing palettes in action first? Request a demo at getavail.com/request-demo. AVAIL helps AECO firms better manage, organize, and navigate information faster. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now let's return to the conversation. Yeah, so how do you develop and just keep a continued learning environment going? Because there's probably all kinds of experiences around that. There's the I'm just going to keep doing it the way I've always done it because I know it works and I'm okay with the holes because I know the 10 workarounds that I need to do, versus vetting through a myriad of options of promises to fill those holes and finding the one needle in the haystack that actually works. That could be fatiguing, just going through that process, right? And that leaves, you could get a lot of different outcomes there. I'm just curious about how you keep this culture of continuous learning going and create time for people to actually try new products, because that's I think another thing a lot of firms struggle with, right? Is we have deadlines. We don't have time to figure out if this new tool is going to do something for us. And so can you talk about that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, time is essentially the root of the challenge, actually. It's not the cost of the products, it's actually time to implement it properly, test it properly. Some of the startups don't understand that things can't happen in 30 days, so, oh yeah, you're going to have to give. I'd rather pay and have a paid trial so we all can sanely think about it, rather than
Right.
30 days and so-and-so has the deadline and well, with good intentions, we want to try it. And I have a lot of eager people who want to try it, but you know how the deadline driven are we and how last minute projects change and then people get pulls from those. So I think time is really a challenge. And a lot of times it's the person's enthusiasm that has made a mark, Evan. And people have gone, if the product is good, have gone above and beyond to test it, even outside of our working hours to make it work. But that I'm not advocating that at all. But what I have tried to do is present the successes through others, not through our team members. So we want to showcase in our presentations them, not us. They trust each other more than they trust someone saying that, hey, we think this is better than that, or you need to use this tool and that. So it's all by example. If we haven't been able to successfully make a team use it, make a few people test it and share the outcomes, then there's nothing to talk about, Evan. Absolutely perfect.
That's great framing, and I think that's a great way to think about it, because it makes so much sense, because it actually puts the impetus on the information coming from them to you rather than the other way around, which now you're in a mode of supporting for success, right? But you're not going to go out and find the things and then force them to use them.
Right. And we're always in search of success stories, whether it's computationally, we've helped someone automate something, or we've helped someone to use a different tool to figure out something, or we asked a group of people. Like I said, we do have what I call our technology allies inside different practices, and we rely on them. And some of them have gone above and beyond to test something to a way that sometimes we don't have a real project to test on. So we go back and use an old project that has that scenario and say, can we, if we had this tool, then would it have made a difference? But these are
time to do that.
That's right. But these are real commitments, Evan, of time and effort and enthusiasm that it's not like everybody has it. So you kind of have to pick and choose and accommodate people's schedule, which is kind of hard to explain to our startups. Like once we start, they keep emailing me. So what happens next? Are we doing it? So are we going to buy it? Or and unfortunately, I understand their predicament because they have a certain amount of money and a certain amount of time to prove themselves. And I think that's the challenge we have together to minimize, to understand each other, to minimize that. So it's a beneficiary. We both are a beneficiary of the process. So, which is why I think that this ecosystem needs to really collaborate with a big C. So sometimes, for example, I have found it refreshing that some startups have set up calls where many of the people who have tried, like us, other firms, are sharing in the conversation. It's not just us and the startup, but we're getting the outcomes of others who have tested it, because we cannot do this alone. And so lots of people have made lists of some kinds, and I've commented on the lists and don't put things in there that you have never touched or know about, and so, or make us contribute and say, we've tested this. And I don't mean in a negative way necessarily, but sharing of our experiences and sharing why it worked in some place and did not work in another, or contributing on how they continue to develop the product is really important. So one of the other factors is that there remains big name products that are like Rhino and Revit that are the dominant tools, and everything else kind of has to talk to them. And if they don't talk to them in the beginning, it's just not going to work. So
it seems like the strategy is it has to talk to them before it can replace them.
That's right.
because of there's so much already invested by the firms into those platforms. It's going to be very tough to switch to something at some point anyway, right? So it has to work its way. The Trojan horse has to work its way into the system.
Yeah, and even if it's not replacing them, Evan, it still has to work with them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's a lack of understanding that, and then a lot of overlap, so like I said, so if you're developing your startup and there is a tool out there that is doing some part of your thing very well, that I don't see why you're building it.
Yeah.
I don't see why you're building it. Yep.
I want to talk more about the refreshing change in practice of this outward sharing, because I think that's kind of lots of firms have kept things to themselves, and they're developing ideas, and they think it's their IP, and they want to keep it to themselves, and there is much more of a sharing culture developing there. Before we go there, though, I just wanted to ask, how do you spotlight these success stories that you talked about with the people who are doing interesting, useful, valuable things with technology in your firm? Do you have an intranet? Do you post those on there? Do you do it outside of the firm as well? Like, how do you approach that, and how do you actually communicate those wins?
We internally have sessions every other week, or at least 2 or 3 times a month. That something is profiled, something that this has been done, and mostly we try to encourage the others to present or co-present with them. We developed recently a platform called Employee Experience Platform, which is purely based on communication. It's a communication site and not an intranet. I don't want to use that word, as that is like a documentation and a depository of things. And this one, so we just deployed that about a month and a half ago, and we're trying to use that also as a way and means of internally sharing that information. Part of the stuff is like sometimes people complain, I didn't know we knew that, or I didn't know we were using that. So that's equally so. I have tried very hard to PR that externally. Like I said, I learned a lot and still need to learn a lot to move some of that engagement outside of our, even I've organized things with our clients, with our clients and collaborators, to have sessions inside to talk about things. How could we have done something better, or how could we collaborated? It starts small. I think the personal relationships are key. We can put things out there, but it's very hard, Evan, to make them read, to make them see. And even in the communication site that we're trying to push information to, my take has been like, say short things, put an image so they so they can see like something changed,
The attention span is
the attention
short.
is, and truthfully, I'm always worried at the amount of information we're pushing, or amount of tools and training we're pushing. And I always say that, well, they need to have time to spend to live and learn their professional expertise, Evan. They're interior designers and architects and urban designers who need to learn and educate, keep their professional growth, for their topics. On top of it, there is an avalanche of tools and technology and things like that. And in some instances, some people can't keep up with it.
Yeah. Yeah, the outward communication also, I'm sure, helps with recruitment and just getting eyeballs on the types of work, the kind of things that you're doing, the way that you're going about doing it to attract talent to the firm, which otherwise is kind of a black box, right? It's like they see a job posting on LinkedIn or wherever, and they get to read what their roles and responsibilities would be, because they're just like everybody else's roles and responsibilities for that job profile. But then there's like, to me, it seems like there's this opportunity for these channels to be presented out there for people to tune into and get more insight into the practice of architecture at CBT, as an example, and the kinds of user profiles and wins and success stories that you're talking about. That, to me, is a great way to get the word out about the culture at CBT And so like the audience there is people who are interested in that content, but also people who are job hunting, right? And looking for a fit for them and the kind of culture they want to work for. So I could see that being useful in
I
that
think
way.
that social media in general, specifically Instagram type things, are mostly mostly they are presenting our culture. They're mostly is for recruitment. Mostly is to have an idea of what kind of a firm are we. Really, I think it's rare that people have found us and given us a project because they've seen us on an Instagram feed or something. It helps after they know about us or after they talk to us to check out all of those things, to figure out what kind of a firm are we and what are we posting and what are we talking about and what our thought leadership is. So I think that part of it is that learning internal PR is one thing, also learning how to do external PR, but also making that as not just about technology. It can't be about technology. It has to be about the business, and our technology things should be incorporated in the project examples, or what did it do for the project, or what did it do for the team building, or because the story is not about the tool, the story is about the outcomes. And technology is just a facilitator to make some outcome better or create an outcome that we couldn't have created without it. But the story is about the end result. It's not about technology.
Yeah, it's why do we do what we do, right? If you're into architecture, if you've chosen this as your career path, it should be to change the built environment, to make a better built environment, to affect, like I did schools, right? It's like to create the best learning environments possible for children, right?
Right.
And tools that help us get there are exactly that. They're leverage to get there faster, better, cheaper, more beautiful. Like there's so many different ways that we could go about doing that, but those aren't why we do what we do, right? Those are how we do what we do and what we use. But the clients often even don't care how you get there. It's like, just create the outcome. That's the value in it for them, and that's what matters for our businesses to survive.
Right, and absolutely don't care about the tool. Why should they care? All they should care is about the outcome. And even internally, at the end of the day, when there is this discussion about this tool or the other, I always say, like, stop and let's go back and ask, why are we doing this again? Why are we doing this? Is it because we're going to change the outcome? So the basic example is, Enscape has taken off like fire, and as in many firms. And when other things come into play, there's always this workflow issue, like somebody can't pick up somebody else's work if you do it in a lot of different formats, right? Which is an efficiency issue. But so when another product comes into play, then we always ask that, you can use that product, but is it doing something that this other product is not doing? And if it's an outcome based and that you want to put motion that the other one isn't doing well, or you want to put some, different analysis that the other, then it is rightfully so the tool to use. But the client doesn't care whether we use A or B. All they care is they asked for something and they got it.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me when a client does kind of prescriptively say, we want this to be used on this project. And you're like, okay, now we have to talk about why.
Yes.
Right?
Well, that was a long time ago, decades ago, when people wrote in the project RFPs, BIM and Revit, and really didn't know what they were asking for.
They didn't have any licenses
they had
of
no
that
clue.
software, right?
They had no clue. And
they hadn't trained anybody how to use it.
That's right.
Any of those things that actually come along with that request. Let's get back to that collaboration, or the sharing that's going on within the industry that you were talking about, seeing on some of these panels that are put together, or these Zoom meetings or whatever they are, but also at the large firm roundtable that you're a part of, that I used to be a part of. That was definitely a shift that's been happening. Is there's been a lot more sharing, and there's a lot more acknowledgement that these tools and these workflows are not IP for a firm, right? It's like, are you having this problem? Raise your hand. Everybody raises their hand. Okay, it's not just us, right? Let's talk about this, right? It makes it easier to talk about things when we acknowledge like, oh, I thought it was just us. No, it's actually everybody. Talk about the culture of sharing, the evolution that you've seen there, and why that's important for the industry to do more of, because it's leading to something.
Yeah. So at least from that end, in terms of the A, the large firm roundtable is mostly A's, although some
Mm-hmm.
of the firms have E's with them. There is a considerable effort to share. And as you know, from the large firm roundtable, a group has developed called Innovation Design Consortium, where it's officially sharing information. And being a member of that, it's really not very hard to think that many of us are doing the same things, and that could benefit of sharing those resources, or doing it once and sharing it all, and not seeing it as a competitive advantage, because they're not. So I feel so that has started about a year ago, and certainly they're making progress. They have it's outside of the large firm roundtable. It started from, but it's an independent organization now, and hopefully it gives a voice also to develop things together, or have a voice to talk to with the larger numbers, because not every firm is 2,000-3,000 people and have the leverage to make a change or request a change. So, but there is certainly common things, computational things, or things that every firm is doing on their own, and we hope that we share that and do it once and share it. And so that's moving along. But I feel like for success of the ecosystem, something has to be developed that kind of goes across the entire chain, all the way to the people who are operating the building. Like I said, before, it is born in our offices, the data sets as designers, but how we move that downstream and make it at least partially beneficial down, and without recreating it at every phase and rehiring people to, it's a very big disconnect. So the similar way where we all are trying on the A side, share and give a boost to our ecosystem. And in terms of we share a lot of information about who has tested what, and that information is valuable when you have 1,000 things to look at, So,
Yeah.
and if that framework can move downstream, and also on every process need to be re-examined, contractual things, relationships as we move from one phase to the other. If that becomes more and more thought about, and those are the things that give us a heads up how to innovate, how to change us completely. And, I think that in this, I'm not sure we can evolve in AI. It's a drastic change. The fact that we use small tools, rendering tools or code tools or anything, is not necessarily, in my opinion, make a big use of the AI ecosystem yet. Once the data sets are coming in, once we're making real conclusions, once we have shared data sets where we're making some deductions from our previous projects, collectively experiences, so that we can project, potential predictions for how should we move ahead with the next project, and what is the learning that's going to happen across that platform. Those are AI things, which we are still pretty far from.
Yeah, where's the standardized, structured data between all these different firms? How's that going to happen?
That's right. We can't even structure our own data in one firm. But I think those are the things that would let us innovate. And that's actually the term that we can legitimately use if we do collaborate on that level and change
Right.
the way we think. We still are in the old mindsets of how things.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I'm curious about this idea of the tools proliferating their value beyond the role, our current role as architects, and what the incentive is there, because the business model hasn't changed, or is it changing? The contracts haven't changed, or are they changing? I'm just curious what the incentive is. I mean, I think everybody agrees that that would be great if we didn't have to redo the work
Right.
at all of these different steps and pay somebody to implement that. And it seems odd that that happens, but it does happen because there's no incentive for the like at that point, it literally is a handoff, right?
Right.
And so what is the incentive to drive that from the architect's and engineer's point of view?
It is changing, but not at a speed way. So I think before, where years ago, where we never gave our Revit model to anybody, that has drastically changed. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, even if we gave it with all kinds of written statements not to use it, not to measure from,
Caveats.
so,
Right.
but now, a lot of our contractors and CMs are saying, well, we want to use the model. So,
Yeah.
and if that means that we need to be a little bit better at building it or understand how.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine being a Suffolk Construction getting Revit models from all these different teams and all these different firms and the different Wild West nature of
Right.
every single project out there, and having to pick that up and deal with it. It's just got to be crazy making.
It is crazy, but the technology is out there to kind of, before, when years ago when there was this IPD concept, the technology wasn't there to support it. Like, I know we experimented it with a couple of different projects where they had to come to our office or we had to go to their office because the structure was not there. We couldn't share a Revit file. So we had to use Revit server, whatever. But now I think there has been the cloud and the posting of all of that content there makes it really, gives hope that these things can be shared and work together. And if you think about it, if you think that we are one company and do downstream everything, then we would behave very differently.
Right.
Right. So
Absolutely.
if we are the designers and have the engineers, and it's just there is a big company above it, and all of us are working for the same concept to make it. But the fact of it is just so fractured that no one can see that it's possible. If we worked for one owner, which is, I guess, what the IPD thing was, to make an organization that is one ownership and make sure that everybody
in this together.
Yeah. So not until we feel that, I think it's hard to change anything, because we don't feel that.
Are there tools out there that are making that kind of restructuring of data, maybe even after the fact, easier? Is that even a possibility, do you think?
So I feel, in one sense, some of these platform-based things are making, like Speckle and others I think they have a great future. The problem I see is that we are so much chained in products, and before I felt changing of tools is an issue. Now I feel the platforms are the issue. So changing of tools is relatively easier, but because we post and collaborate in certain platforms, that is not going to go away. So it is hard to be optimistic about that. I'm trying, but it's hard.
That is a very difficult reality to deal with, right? Because all of the consultants on the team have to also be using
the
same version of the software,
yes.
Right? Not just the same platform, the same version, exactly, right? Or else you're going to run into potential problems.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we call it?
Um, no, I really enjoyed the conversation. It's been great, Evan, and I hope I hope that these conversations and multi layer and multi people conversation actually make us become more aware of how we can contribute to this ecosystem. I think we do a lot of talking, we do a lot of planning, but I see not very much action. And all of us complain. All of us are not happy. But I hope that we actually do something about it.
Yeah, the complaint department, right? And then the accountability part of like the next part after the complaints. It's like everybody kind of looks over their shoulder. I thought you were
Blaming
gonna do
somebody
that.
else. Yes.
To
Yes.
actually do the thing to fix this problem is not the complaint part. That's the easy part, right? The hard part is the actual
That's right.
action
I mean,
part.
I see some hope on some of those things and some conversations of real change and some conversations of sharing, but there's definitely less action. I mean, podcasts like this are terrific, Evan, in terms of bringing our voices from different perspectives, from different roles, from together to validate all of our issues. But what is disappointing is there's little action and more conversation. So I do see some data efforts, the common data platforms and other things that several companies or other efforts that are coming together between the different European architects and others that are trying to work together for that. But it's just too slow, Evan.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Nirva.
Thank
you
you.
so much. And I think just shifting the perspective more downstream, like you were mentioning there, if we think about our work product as think about the next people who are going to get it, that alone is something worth contemplating and how it might start to affect what you do today to not incur technical debt, right? Because that's if you do something now that just benefits you in the short term to meet this deadline, but it breaks 10 things downstream, it's not worth it. And so to be thinking about and have empathy for those future users of that data is
so the small example is within the office, but the bigger example is, from design phases to construction. That's the small example. Think about the other teams, but also think about the larger workflow of moving it from one office to the other in terms of making the building built at the end and operated. I mean, digital twins and all of this, all these conversation, if everything's going to be starting all over again, and that's really a huge problem to solve.
Waste in the system.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Nirva.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co, and I'll talk to you again next week.